All right, family, we have made it to module 5 of the Parenting for Liberation course for Black Christian parents. Again, you know who I am. But I will go ahead and share my screen to share the lecture notes with you all. And we'll first let's look at the outline for this particular module today. Module 5, so it's chapter 3 of Spare the Kids by Dr. Stacy Patton and chapter 5 of Spare the Child by Dr. Philip Grievin. The objective of this particular module is to introduce the proposed solution to the perpetuation of cultural, historical, and racial trauma by whooping Black children in the Black Christian household. It is being proposed that Black Christian parents adopt liberating parenting practices as a constructive discipline, which does not include whooping their children. Checks for understanding are, after analyzing this week's reading, what is your understanding of liberating parenting practices, and how do you see this being implemented in Black Christian households? Question 2, how would liberation theology and parenting for liberation supplement one another's philosophical construct? And 3, what impact, positive or negative, would liberation parenting practices have on Black culture as a whole? Would this framework help in the liberation of Black people from its own devices of trauma perpetuation? And in light of module 3 lecture, perhaps we could say, how would this framework help in the liberation of Black people from post-traumatic slave syndrome as well? So let's look at our outline or our lecture notes for today, or for this particular module. So again, module 5 is Spare the Kids, chapter 3 by Dr. Stacy Patton, and then Spare the Child, chapter 5 by Dr. Philip Grievin. Let's look at this first. So Spare the Kids, we'll look at that one out of chapter 3, Extending the Master's Lash. Now, we've already looked at James Cone and his push for adopting liberation theology. Now, the idea is that liberation theology would supplement the work of parenting practices, because discipline, the root word of that is disciple, right? So, how do we as parents disciple our children, right? And the only way we could do that and wrap our mind around that is if we have a liberating theology framework and thought process, and then allow that to influence or impact the way that we discipline our children, which does not include whooping them, right? And so, Spare the Kids, Extending the Master's Lash. While physical punishment is deeply rooted in the American way of raising kids, history provides a clear explanation for why so many Black people embrace this harsh form of discipline while falsely believing that whooping is something uniquely different. It's not different at all. History asserts, and we've kind of talked about this, of course, throughout the last 2 lectures. History asserts, and we know this, that physical discipline, or whoopings, lashings, beatings, right? That ain't nothing that Black culture started. That was something that the slave masters pushed on Black people. That's how they got us in check back then, right? So this is how slave masters got people to be enslaved Black folks to be submissive to what it is that they wanted them to do. Very manipulative, very perverted, right? And so it's nothing new. We Black folks didn't come up with whooping. This has been a long history of things in America that we've culminated to. Right. And so white America has long derived power from assuring that Black children are victims of physical, intellectual, psychological, and spiritual violence, and that people raising them are complicit in their abuse. Right. So for a long time now, white America has wanted to ensure that Black children had all that power taken away from them as children. If you manipulate a child in their thought process, as they grow older, 9 times out of 10, the thought process is not going to change, right? Because you are the people that raised you. You are the people that cultivated you. That's that nature and nurture philosophy or ideology or rationale or theory, that basically the way that you were raised is the way that you will grow up to be, right? And we talked about that a little bit last module as well, and saying that Black folks have over time perpetuated these cycles of trauma because of what we've been exposed to. Now, because at the initiation of slavery, most of slaves were children, right? Over time, those children became adults, but by the time they became adults, their personalities, their will had already been stripped away from them, right? And white America has thrived on black folks or black children not having a willpower. Because if you don't have a willpower, you have vacant esteem. You adopted that racial socialization and the ever-present anger, right? And so it's again, whooping black children is not nothing new. It's been a long history of whooping black children, and this is something that white America loves. So, black people have imported violence into black culture by believing that whooping children will garner freedom for white communities. It simply does not. So, we've adopted it because over time, now let's paint the picture. If being whooped by a slave master meant that I was not being traumatized and I was going to change my behavior, the only way that I know how to have somebody else to change their behavior is to do what was done to me. That's that post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so now the picture here is starting to be painted a little more clearly over time. Again, that violence was imported into black culture. We didn't just wake up one day and decided to be violent to one another. But again, in making sure or trying to make sure that our black folks didn't get caught up in the white systems that we were caught up in or had been traumatized by, whooping them was the only way that we thought we could do that. So white adults began to reconceptualize white childhood as a newly developed space for innocence, promise, and security. Now, people always say that's some white people stuff if you don't whoop your kids. Huh? But history asserts who has been the most successful. Because that ideology that they're innocent, that there is a promise and a sense of security in parenthood for white children. That's why they have secure attachments for the most part, some of them, right? But there's still that ideology, that stereotype that white people have made their children to be these innocent little angels, and that's perfectly fine that they are. Children really are sweet. All children become not sweet when adults put them through traumatic experiences. And so on one hand, you have white folks who are trying not to traumatize their children. And then on the other hand, we have black folks who ignorantly or unconsciously traumatize their children. And then we put those children and parallel their lives. And then we say, oh, the black kid went off and did whatever. And then the white kid stayed on this straight and narrow path. Why? Because of the trauma that they were exposed to. And there's an intentional, systematic trauma that black people have been fallen victim to that white people or white kids have not. So black children are exempt from the freedoms of childhood, running, playing, getting dirty, and making mistakes. It's a problem. Um, don't let a kid go outside in his school shoes and get him dirty. All hell gonna break loose. But I mean, let's be for real. We've heard often in grocery stores at parks like, oh, it's okay, it's all right. We'll just we'll throw it in the washer or whatever. But no, get them school clothes dirty if you want to. And as black folks, we've heard that. We've heard that. Get them shoes. I wish you would. I wish you would. And so we've taken the innocence away from black children. We've taken the innocence away from them. Long before coming to this country, white people ruled their children in savagery. And those children came to America, traumatized and transforming traumas to other cultures via slavery. So where did the trauma start at? With white folks. How else do you think that they got this mindset that they were going to traumatize other people? Hurt people, hurt people. That's a real thing, right? And so white people in the Eurocentric construct had been raising their children a certain type of way. Their kids said, "I don't like this for us, but if we want other people to just fall into whatever we need them to fall into, here's how we do that: we enslave them and we beat the hell out of them." And it worked because here we are in this post-traumatic slave syndrome state, in this state of mind or reference or being where We are experience cultural trauma, historical trauma, and racial trauma on a continual basis, and we perpetuate those cycles sometimes. There is a lack of pre-colonial African accounts of discipline due to Africa being a large continent with various religions and customs. Most of their practices were learned through games, stories, and other oral methods. Thus, there aren't solid accounts of discipline prior to Europeans coming to Africa teaching the English language. So Africa is huge. We know this. There's a bunch of tribes. There's a bunch of religions. There's a lot going on in Africa, right? There's a lot going on in Africa, but there aren't any accounts because there aren't any accounts, written accounts rather, of where Black people said that they were beating their kids in Africa, or there's a lack of that, right? Because the way that we told stories was via games and stories and oral methods of communication versus writing stuff down. We didn't have an English language. English language came from Eurocentric constructed people, and then they taught us the English language. So of course, we wouldn't have accounts of that because we weren't in Europe. We were in Africa. And so traditional African child rearing methods have been preserved if white traditional African child rearing methods would have been preserved, thank you, if whites bought over more adults become slaves rather than you. So intentionally, come on now. They didn't bring adults, they had kids. Kids came over. You can't preserve tradition if I never had a time to be a part of the tradition because I'm young. So don't bring the folks over here who know the way. Bring the folks over here who haven't been taught in the way, and let's make a different way for them. And this way is going to be embedded in savagery and trauma. And so here we have spare the child. Even in the late 20th century, the words written by prophets, chroniclers, and other centuries before birth of Jesus remain major sources of Christians' rationales for physical discipline and punishment of children, casting shadows of pain and suffering over the lives of vast numbers of people for more than 2 millennia. Right, the justification of physical discipline by the author of Hebrews thus drew upon an ancient history filled with instances of divine chastisement and pain, while he himself supplied memories of the personal anguish that once felt grievous to him and to others. Physical discipline is not and cannot be grounded in words ascribed to Jesus or Paul. Now that's something when we can't say that Jesus, come on, if we're Christian, we're followers of Christ, if we can't even paint the picture that that Jesus was out here whipping people kids, and Paul didn't have no account. We know Paul wrote most of the New Testament, but we don't have no account of Paul saying that that's the way that you should raise your kids. What does that tell us about Christianity? If we're Christians and we whip our kids, what does that say about our Christianity? Where do we get that from? Where do we get this from? If we don't see it in Scripture, by two of the most infamous chroniclers, um, the most infamous chroniclers in Scripture, why have we sufficed or found sufficiency in whooping our black children? How did that come about? Because it has been embedded in us, and we have been indoctrinated to believe that that's the way that it should be. For centuries, Protestant Christians have been among the most ardent advocates for corporal punishment, right? And so we have to be, even as Black Christians, we have to be intentional about knowing the history of church, right? That's in the dissertation as well, right? Knowing the history of the Black church and how we got to where we are today, right? And knowing that historically, the Protestant church have been advocates for corporal punishment. So you have to look at the Reformation in which you're a part of, how your Reformation became what it is, and then decipher as to, oh wait, like is this really accurate then? Is this what we actually believe in and or why? And I really want to make this argument. What we haven't whooped our kids because of Christianity and black culture. We've whooped our kids because we have been traumatized to and indoctrinated to believe that's the way that we're supposed to be doing it. In view of the persistence of physical assaults and violence against children, generation after generation, it is surely no accident that apocalyptic beliefs among Protestants have remained an enduring part of American character, um, enduring part of American character and thought for the past 4 centuries. So much Christian theology has been rooted in the threat of punishment that we need to be aware of the personal experiences that have made such theologies sensible and powerfully appealing to so many people for such a long time. We need to reflect on our theology. And here's why it's just, goodness. Here's why it's so important that we need liberation theology. Because if we take this Eurocentric construct and we try to apply it in a way that it's been and try to make it beneficial to black people, it'll never work. It never fits because it wasn't built for us. It was built and to oppress us, or it was used to oppress us. So we have to be intentional at dissecting the word for ourselves as black Christian people and read from the construct of an oppressed person. If we read from the construct that this theology that has been pushed towards us has been used to oppress us, and then we try to paint a new path, we should paint a new path and look at the scriptures from a way that he is actually near. Jesus is near to those who have been oppressed, who have been victims of trauma. Jesus is near to those people. So, how on God's green earth can we take this Eurocentric construct that has been used to oppress us, adopt it, and then continue to perpetuate our children in cultural, historical, and racial trauma, furthermore pushing the agenda of post-traumatic slave syndrome? Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Because it never works. It's insanity. We keep doing the same thing over and over, and then we expect us to be liberated and free. But it'll never work. We're going to continue to spin our wheels. And now we've done exactly what they wanted us to do because they've indoctrinated us. We've taken it and we've taken this racial socialization construct and Eurocentric construct of theology. We've adopted it. We've made it the standard, and now we've pushed it to our children. And for generations and generations and generations, here we have it. We've been whooping the hell out of our kids. Hmm. And so, despite all efforts by advocates of the rod and the belt to convince us that physical punishment is the Christian method of discipline, we must reject this confusion of fear with love and begin to act upon our knowledge that physical violence against children, excuse me, physical violence against children urged by so many Christians is truly not Christian at all. I love it. I love it. That's not no Christian nothing. You can't tell me that it is. You cannot tell me that it is. Come on, let's be for real. We hurt kids. And we know for a fact Jesus loved the kids. He loved the kids. For sure he do. He loved the little kids. Jesus loved the little children. All of the children of the world. Come on. We know he loved the children that let's say Lewis and me just started to come out. Jesus loved the kids though, for real. But because we know Jesus loved the kids, why don't we treat our kids in the same fashion that Jesus would treat them in a loving manner? Let's be for real. Let's be for real. I moved to that one quick. I moved to that real quick. But moreover, we have to be intentional about what we do as parents and making sure that we aren't extending the master's lash. That we're not extending the master's lash, but we're actually raising our kids and discipling them in a way that Jesus would have for us to disciple our children. That's all I have for you for this module. That one was pretty short, sweet, and to the point. But let's be intentional about moving forward and keeping this in mind that we were not whooping our kids. So don't let them tell you that this is how that came about. Y'all been doing this. No, you taught me how to do this. You traumatized me into doing this. You've indoctrinated me into doing this. And because your doctrine has traumatized me so much so we've accepted it as a people and we continue to perpetuate it over and over and over and over and over again. That's what has happened. So I'll see y'all in the next module. We got one more lecture to go. And we will wrap up this course. See you next time.